Hi, it's Simon from writteneaglenglish.com. On Monday, I posted this post that you can see behind me on Facebook with the redrafts that I would like you to do for this week. And just like last week, they are based on nominalization. So you have to find the nominalization, or at least find if it's not a nominalization, find the noun, which should be a strong verb, and then choose an appropriate strong verb, and then redraft the message. But this time, as I said in the post, I want you to think about this in a slightly different way. I want you to think about this from the point of view of the client and how the client will understand your choice of verb and the structure you use, the verb structure that you use, so that they understand the message or might understand the message in different ways. And in this video, I just want to go into a little bit of detail about what that really means. So let's have a look at an example sentence that we had a look at from last week's redrafts, and it's this: the board made an announcement about the plan to reduce its debt. And we can see the nominalization here. It's make an announcement, and of course the strong verb would be announce. So somehow you've got to choose a verb form which includes the strong verb announce in your redraft. And in doing that, we have a number of options available to us. We can say, the board announced, the board is announcing, the board have announced, the board have been announcing, all active voice verbs. We can go for the passive if we think the action is more important than the person doing that action, so which in a context could very well be possible. The plan is being announced, the plan has been announced. Now, here, with the nominalization, I know that we've got a simple past form and it's talking about an announcement in the past, but let's just forget about that from the point for the time being. I just want to examine what these verbs mean to the person who is reading them. So, and this will cause you to go back in your minds to when you were taught English and why we use specific grammar forms. So we've got the simple forms here, simple past. We use the simple to talk about truths, habits, promises, etc., etc., or facts. And that's what we're doing here. The board announced a plan to reduce its debt. Straightforward fact, happened in the past. We don't know when, but it's a fact that happened in the past. And so from the point of view of the reader, they would go, okay, it happened in the past. You might decide to use the continuous form, and you might say the board is announcing, which would suggest to the reader that this is a process which is happening now. The activity is underway. It started just recently. It hasn't finished yet, and that means the reader would be waiting for news. What would happen when the plan is actually announced? What would be the final summary? What do I do next? So it would suggest to the client that they have to wait a little bit until the plan has actually finally been announced. You might decide to use the perfect form. So we've got a completed action in the past that is somehow relevant to now. And of course, there could be many contexts in which a decision in the past or a plan which has been announced in the past is relevant to now. And that context could be established by you, it could be established by the client, or it could be established by a number of other contexts as well. So you might think, I need to connect those two events together, something that happened in the past to now, and that connection is really, really important. Or you might decide to use present continuous, perfect continuous, and you might say have been announcing, so it started in the past, it's been going on and on and on up until now, it hasn't finished yet. So you would use this to suggest time or stress the time that something that has been happening, and of course that message would be communicated to the client as well. So if they see that, they'll think, okay, it's happened in the past, it's still underway, it's still happening now. Not that it's just happening now, but it happened in the past and it's still happening now. So that context of something happening in the past continuing until now might be an important message for you to communicate, or it might be an important message that you want the client to understand. You might decide to go for passive form. As I said, the plan is being announced, so continuous. Passive continuous is happening now. The activity is more important than the person who's doing the announcing, but I want you to know that the plan is being announced. The plan has been announced. We don't know who by, maybe it's not important, but but the perfect passive is important because I want to make that connection to now because there's a context. So if we quickly recap, as I've just done there, the main reasons why we use verb tenses, then you can identify a couple of things. First of all, there's lots of different ways that you can communicate a message using our strong main verb. And you might decide to use that message because you want to communicate it in that way, and you might have many reasons for doing that. Or you might want to communicate that message so the client understands it in a particular way. Now, in practice, those two, although it sounds like they mean the same thing, you want to communicate something and you want that person to understand the way that you communicate it. In practice, very often, those two goals are not the same. And you want the client to understand something, or you want the opposition party to understand something, or you want someone to understand something which might not be exactly the same message that you know. And there's a number of different cases in which this can happen, but in practice, such contexts regularly exist. And the most common one would be if someone's putting you under pressure to get something done. So you might decide to use the continuous form because it suggests action now. I'm doing this. So it might not be the case. It might be something that you've got planned for an hour or two later on in the day, but you're just saying, I'm doing this now, in order just to give yourself a little bit of time. So that's just one quick example of how your choice of verb form would be different to the verb form you want the client to understand. So when we think about how we can use verbs and the verb structures that we use and the reasons why we use those verb structures, and apply that to the fact that we need to use a strong verb, then it opens up to a certain degree the possibility of how we think about how we communicate our message. And I know that sounds rather preachery and it sounds rather abstract, but on Friday, when we go through the sentences, then I'll apply that thinking, how we can use different verb forms, or how we can interpret different verb forms from the nominalization or from the nouns which are used in the text. And as a result of that, you will see, one, why verbs are much better than nouns. Secondly, how nouns can be interpreted in many different ways. And thirdly, why that's not such a good thing from the point of view of you communicating a message. So it's not just a question of there's a nominalization, nominalizations are bad, let's cure the nominalization. It's a question of how do we cure the nominalization to communicate the message I want to communicate? And that is a skill that needs to be developed over time. So I'll see you again on Friday as I go through those sentences. There's links in the video below the video to the exercise I posted on Monday and to the exercises that we did last week. So in case you missed those, go check them out, and I'll see you again on Friday.